Microsoft and its employees. Thank you to all our foundation partners.
Support for KUOW comes from the Multiple Sclerosis Program of the Eastside Neuroscience Institute, offering specialists in diagnosing and treating MS. Their team works with Evergreen Health and Overlake Medical Center and clinics to offer local comprehensive services. More at eastsiderneuroinstitute.org.
Hey, I'm Ton Vin, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW. Things are changing constantly in our food scene. This month, we lost some legendary Seattle restaurants, and two of the hottest openings were actually outside the city. We break it all down on the latest episode of Seattle Eats. Listen to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
The state legislature is facing a $15 billion deficit over the next 4 years. Options for dealing with that may include a wealth tax or a jump start style tax on big businesses or deep cuts in spending. Our news panel will take that up in the noon hour today with KUOW's Bill Radke. That's coming up in 20 minutes. 52 degrees at 11:40.
Support for On Point comes from BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public. And MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com.
You're back with On Point. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, and Corey Keyes is our guest today. He's Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Emory University and author of the book Languishing: How to Feel Alive Again in a World That Wears Us Down. And we will get to your very rich suggestions on how to pull ourselves out of languishing or even avoid it as a state, Professor. We'll get to that in a minute. But when I read your book, I was also incredibly fascinated that there were 8 deadly sins at one time. Had no idea. And it's interesting to me because what we're talking about, we're using the term languishing now. I had mentioned ennui as a previously popular term, but to me that one also sort of engenders visions of the idle rich who are just bored into meaningless by virtue of their wealth. But this experience, as documented by the desert monks, and again, is it Axidae? How do you say it?
Acedia.
Acedia. Okay, good. Apologies to every speaker of ancient Greek out there, or even modern Greek. My apologies. So what's interesting to me about the fact that these monks experienced acedia is because when I look at it, they would have had in their lives all of the things that one would think would be needed or to battle against that feeling of emptiness, right? They had a close community. They had routine. They had a deep sense of meaning by virtue of their faiths and their study of theology. Yeah. These are all things that in different ways in your book, you talk about. That's what helps form a rich and flourishing life. And yet these monks experienced this acedia themselves. Do you have, can you put yourself in the mind of a desert monk and maybe even just hypothesize as to why?
Well, I think one possibility is that the lives of these desert monks were quite isolated for most of the time. They were, by design, as a way to reach God, was that you had to sacrifice and in isolation work on your spiritual formation. So you described a community, to my extent of understanding of their lives. There was a disconnection with most other human beings, and in order to connect more purely with God and the religious formation and so that they could carry that message back into the world and others. And so I thought what they were doing was rather unnatural to human nature. It's asceticism, it's sacrifice, and it's disconnection with ordinary human beings as a way to form oneself spiritually.
Yes.
Now, I think some people would say that that's the right way to go. I myself tend to prefer the way most Buddhists practice their form of formation, which is in what they call the Sangha, a community of like-minded people where on a regular basis, you may spend a lot of time meditating alone, but there's a lot of communal activity and sharing and supporting of each other. So to my extent of understanding, the early Christian desert monks, there was a sort of unnaturalness to the social nature of being human that I think caught up with them.
So this gets me to my question about whether or not experiencing languishing at any point in life is actually, it is a normal experience for human beings. Because, you know, ideally we're in good states of mental health for our entire lives, but that's not how the human mind, soul works, right? We sort of fluctuate between different states of being. Can't languishing be seen as one of those temporary, less than optimal mental states that I'm gonna suggest here that perhaps is it an opportunity to reassess what gives a person's life meaning if they feel the absence of it?
Yes, I think you've touched on the most important part of it. It is, to me, a very normal state of being. That is, it's think of it as an opportunity or a wake up call for you that says something good and necessary for my life has gone missing. And that's why I describe some aesthesia is in the desert monks. What I saw in their writings was a longing for something good that was lost, and a kind of hunger that you could. That's an interesting word that people often use when they're languishing. I'm hungry for something more, and that something more is often to return to some of those conditions that I described in the concept of flourishing or good mental health, to have a life where it has direction and meaning, to have a life where you feel accepting of other people and accepting of yourself and a variety of other good things. And so to me, it's a wake-up call. But I think what happens is that, and I don't think this is endemic to just modern life, is that when we feel these moments of emptiness, we don't take or have enough time to sit with them such that we answer its call, which is to say, I think you need to change what you're doing right now.
It's Jackson Browne all over again, right? You're running on empty, but you're running, right?
Running on. You keep running on. That's right. Exactly. He had to get to the next town.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no stopping. And that's typical of what gets in the way. And suddenly, Meghna, what was a normal response persists too long. And that's where it turns from normal to dysfunctional, in the same way that sadness and fear are normal emotional reactions, that if they persist too long and at a level that's too intense, become mental disorders called depression or anxiety.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just offer a slight story of my own recent experience with this?
Oh, I would love if you did.
Well, because I'm not going to say that I suffered from a pathological experience of languishing, but we are living in a world where I can imagine millions and millions of people feel this, because especially in America of 2024, there are so many pressures that keep people having to continue to just be at in survival mode. Like having to just put food on the table, roof over your head, kids in school, healthcare, etc. Those are things in and of themselves, which are enough to make someone wonder, what else is my life for? But I'm going to put that aside for a second. I just want to acknowledge that. So in my case, I have deep privilege working in the job that I do, right? And I consider myself lucky every single day. However, at the same time, the news business being what it is, every single day, my mind's kind of marinated in all the ills and wrongs of the world, right? That's what covering news can be a lot. And I noticed that it really, it just reshapes your brain after a time. And you think, well, what could ever be solved, right? What could ever be good if we're just moving from one terrible story to the next as human beings? So a couple of years ago, this was really starting to bother me. I was like, I need to think more positive thoughts about humanity. And so I just started volunteering in that local Lego robotics program for kids.
Oh, nice.
And it was astonishing, Professor. I'm going to tell you, the feeling of joy, flourishing, excitement, and excitement for others that I get by watching these kids just solve little problems or try 100 times to build something before they get it right and just being thrilled by it, that in and of itself totally transformed my life away from work. And I wanted to just share that because, at least in my case, and I think you hint at this in the book, we'll talk about your 5 vitamins in a second, but trying to sort of draw oneself out slowly out of a state of languishing doesn't necessarily require like any huge revolution, right? There are things that we can readily do.
Yes. And I think, and I've read some of the reviews, my editor said, don't go reading all the reviews, but I wanted to, because I think I was intrigued by the reaction that people have to the part on the vitamins.
Yeah.
That what I'm asking people to do, based on scientific evidence, is to stop doing some of the things they're doing and start doing some of these new activities. And the response is typically like, well, my life is too complicated. You're not taking, you're not very aware of all the problems people experience. Their life is too busy, and it's. I understand that. I do. But what's remarkable to me is that there comes a point in life where you have to say no. I'm not willing to do what isn't sustaining my soul anymore. And there are moments in my life, and I write about my own struggles with it. I had to say no to a professor of English after my freshman year who said, Corey, you don't belong here. Because I almost flunked, my grade point average as a freshman, as I came to the end of that year, was 2.01. I was 1/100th of a point from being on academic probation. And I did not do well in English, no matter how many times I rewrote my essays. And so this professor took me aside and decided to tell me I don't belong. And I said no. I didn't say no to him. After I spent that summer saying, well, I'm going to prove him wrong. I think he's wrong. And I'm going to go back and change the way I go about this. And I'm going to have to do some hard work. And it did change. And I think my point in bringing all that up is that I couldn't wait for the world to change so that my life would become better. And especially as a trauma survivor, I learned very quickly that the world didn't give a damn about me and my needs. And so I was going to have to take care of those things. And so my attitude has always been, if we want something to change in our life, we have to begin in small ways and do things differently for ourselves and the people we love, and stop waiting for the healthcare system to catch up with us. Stop waiting for the political system to all those things do need to change. Don't get me wrong. But I grew tired very early on in my life of waiting for the world to become a nicer, better place. And so I decided to go out and get what I needed.
Yeah.
What I learned very quickly was that you can't just demand these good things. You have to give them in order to get them. That is what you just described, Magna. In order to feel good and change the view of myself and the world, I had to go out and do something good, not bad.
Yeah.
Right?
So can you tell me a little bit more, just briefly, because there's also a voice of one listener that I want to hear from. We have a little bit of tape from them. But so what are the things then? Just give me the headlines on the things that people can do, the vitamins.
Well, what's remarkable is that it didn't matter whether you were depressed, languishing, or flourishing. In order to stay flourishing or to move out of depression or languishing, people who did that did more of the 5 things. They started doing activities that had something to do with helping other people or something improve in the world. Second, they started engaging in learning something new, so trying to challenge themselves and learn and grow only for the sake of learning something, not because it was useful in their job or at school. Third, they engaged in specific. They changed the way they socialize and connect with people. It wasn't just that we need relationships with the others. We need relationships where there's warmth and trust, where we are needed, or what we sociologists call where we matter, and where we feel we belong. So we need to feel warmth, trust, belonging, and a sense of mattering. We don't need just any relationships. We need the qualities that make them meaningful to us. Fourth, people who flourished or moved towards it engaged in what I call transcendent rituals, spiritual or religious activities. And the last was they engaged in some form of play. They did things just because it was fun, or what we would call active rather than passive leisure. By active, I mean they went out and did things to have fun rather than sit down and consume what they called leisure.
Get off your screens, is what you're saying.
Yeah, get off your screens, get off your couches. You might call that leisure, but the leisure that helps your well-being is the stuff where you're not sitting down, where you're doing something.
Yeah. Can I just jump in here, Professor? Because we only have a minute left, and I shouldn't have kept this for so long until the end. But there's a lot of different. You said there was criticism of your 5 vitamins, but we heard from a listener who's a 58-year-old man, and he had a particular concern that. He said it was hard. It's harder for men to do some of the things that you suggested, form those close social connections. He said men just don't seem to have a desire to open up and get real about things. But he understands that making those connections is key to having a flourishing life. I mean, as a fellow gentleman yourself, I'm wondering how you would respond to that.
Oh yes, I've just read some articles about that. Friendships among men. As adults, are some of the hardest things to find, and I suspect some of that is this gender socialization. It probably goes well beyond that. But when I'm talking about warmth and trust and belonging and mattering, it requires being vulnerable, admitting that you need somebody, that you feel weak, that you're emotional. So I think we could do a lot to help men along this path.
Well, Professor, I'm so sorry to have to interrupt you, but we have just 10 seconds left, and I want to mention the name of the book again. It's called Languishing: How to Feel Alive Again in a World That Wears Us Down. Professor Corey Keyes, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and Seed. Seed's DS-01 is a 24-strain, 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic, engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public. And BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public.
1158 KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. I'm Guy Nelson in for Bernard Willett today, and just ahead, the Week in Review. We're going to discuss the week's news with KUOW's Bill Radke and his guests. Hey, Bill, what's on the hot sheet for today?
Oh, so many questions. How much the more taxes or how much the less spending compared to the more spending? And does Sound Transit's new CEO deserve the job? And lots more of the week's news, too, and what made my panelists smile this week. Please stay tuned.
Looking for a break from heavier news stories? You're not alone, and KUOW is here to help. Presenting The Rain Shadow, a newsletter devoted to brighter stories from KUOW and NPR. Like the weather pattern of the same name, The Rain Shadow offers a sunnier perspective and a storm of information, with stories that spark joy and ignite your curiosity. Kind of like the feeling of seeing a rainbow through the rain. Had enough of the rain puns yet? Subscribe today at kuow.org/sunny.
Support for KUOW comes from Mount Baker Roofing. From Everett to Blaine, Mount Baker Roofing has been dedicated to providing quality craftsmanship for 40 years and has installed over 20,000 roofs, offering a full range of services including roof replacement, gutters, and repairs. More at mtbakerroofing.com.
Hi, I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And I'm Joshua McNichols. We host KUOW's economy podcast, Booming.
Lawmakers in Washington are pushing big tech companies to make social media safer for teens. Could this mean the end of endless scrolling?
On the latest episode, why parents, tech workers, and even kids are asking for social media regulation and what Washington could do about it.
Listen to Booming on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Quick science refresher, all right? When organic material gets put into landfills, it makes methane, which is a more potent greenhouse gas, as you probably know, than CO2.
Getting stuff that rots out of landfills is a very cheap way to quickly reduce carbon emissions.
I'm Kai Rizdal Composting as a company. Next time on Marketplace.
We'll check out those stories in the day's business news on Marketplace today, 2:30 this afternoon, and again this evening at 6:30 on KUOW. 51 degrees in the University District, rain all day today. It's 12:01, now the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Trump is reiterating his threat to take control of Greenland, citing matters of national and international security.
We need Greenland, very importantly, for international security. We have to have Greenland. It's not a question of, do you think we can do without it? We can't. If you look at Greenland right now, if you look at the waterways, you have Chinese and Russian ships all over the place. And we're not going to be able to do that. We're not relying on Denmark or anybody else to take care of that situation.
Greenland and Denmark have repeatedly blasted Trump for his threats, emphasizing that the Danish territory is not for sale. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife are visiting a U.S. military base in Greenland today. In Moscow, NPR's Charles Maines reports Russian President Vladimir Putin is giving something of an endorsement to the Trump administration's proposal to take over the island.
Speaking at a forum in the Arctic port city of Murmansk, Putin extolled on the U.S.'s historical links to Greenland. The Kremlin leader noted that the U.S. first tried to win control over the territory in the 19th century and then again after World War II. Putin said it was obvious the Trump White House was advancing its strategic interests in the Arctic and made clear Russia would not stand in Trump's way. While the Kremlin has expressed intense concern over the growing military competition between Russia and NATO in the Arctic, it's been more sympathetic to Trump's bid to control Greenland. Kremlin critics say Putin sees the move as helping justify Moscow's own historical and security interests in Ukraine. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Several unions say they're planning to fight back against an executive order signed by President Trump that will end collective bargaining for thousands of federal employees. NPR's Andrea Hsu reports the White House says the president has the authority to do so.
The White House says under a 1978 federal law, the president can end collective bargaining in federal agencies whose missions involve national security. Already, for example, CIA agents do not have union representation. But now Trump has expanded this to groups of employees at close to 20 other agencies, including the Departments of Agriculture, Veterans Affairs, Health and Human Services, State, Justice, and many others. In a fact sheet, the White House said certain federal unions have declared war on President Trump's agenda. Unions have sued the Trump administration to block some of its actions, including the mass firings of employees and access to sensitive data. They're calling this latest move a retaliatory attack. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
Stocks are trading sharply lower at this hour on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 687 points. The Nasdaq Composite down 465. This is NPR News in Washington.
This is KUOW News. I'm Kevin Kniestead in Seattle. Washington State's unemployment rate has gone up just slightly, but doesn't yet reflect widespread federal job cuts. The jobless rate in Washington is 4.4% as of February, barely above the January numbers. That's a bit higher than the 4.1% rate nationwide. The biggest job losses last month in Washington came in construction and leisure and hospitality. The Employment Security Department says high-profile Trump administration layoffs likely won't show up in the numbers until next month's report. A certain model of therapy is showing promise in helping people move away from home to college. Can be a big adjustment and stressful, but therapy dogs may help. Northwest Public Broadcasting's Lauren Patterson reports.
College students who spent time each week with therapy dogs on campus were less stressed and depressed than students who didn't. That's according to new research from Washington State University. Patricia Pendry is a WSU professor who worked on the study. Researchers found when they offered freshmen who left their pets behind at home the opportunity to interact with registered therapy dogs.
It sort of lessens and prevents the onset of stress-related mental health issues and really enhances their psychological well-being for that first semester.
It's also a relatively inexpensive way to offer students support, Pendry says. So she wouldn't be surprised if WSU expanded their use of therapy dogs on campus. I'm Lauren Patterson in Pullman, Washington.
A Dairy-Gold powdered milk factory in Linden caught fire this week, causing more than $1 million in damage. The Bellingham Herald reports that it took crews more than an hour to bring the fire under control. 3 trucks and 16 firefighters responded to the blaze on Wednesday. The Herald says there were no reported injuries, and fire officials are still investigating the cause. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Bank of America. From local shops to global enterprises, Bank of America is committed to helping businesses of all sizes make every move matter. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking for business.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. My name is Bill Radke. So many questions we have this hour. I can settle one question for you. I read in a question in the Seattle Times sports section. The headline was, "Will Mariners opening day thriller jumpstart frustrated fan base?"
Yes.
Well, of course, I had to find out the answer. So I read all the way through, and the answer was, quote, "Who knows?" So to save you a little time, there are 161 games left. Hi, Cathy Allen.
Hi.
Nice to see you. This is longtime local political consultant Cathy Allen. Hello, longtime local political consultant Randy Pepple. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
And hello, political and public affairs consultant Sandeep Kaushik. Welcome back.
Hey, Bill.
All of you. Also, Sandeep, you can catch him on Seattle Nice and Blue City Blues podcasts. But right now we're doing Week in Review, and let's begin this week with, you know that thing when you're a state government and you're counting on federal money and Trump says you're not getting as much federal money, but you still have a giant budget deficit?
I know. I hate when that happens.
And that is happening in Olympia, where the legislature sees $15 billion fewer dollars coming in than it had wanted to spend over the next 4 years, and that's just the operating budget. Will the legislature make such big cuts, Randy, in planned spending, not spending cuts, but more spending? Will they reduce those spending plans enough that they will pass neither a wealth tax nor a jumpstart style tax on big business?
No.
They will not. So you're saying, are you expecting wealth tax and or a payroll tax, Cathy?
No.
No, you're not expecting those increases.
No.
So they will cut enough to not do those increases.
That's correct.
Okay, Sandeep.
No, look, I would have agreed with them a few weeks ago, but
Which one?
That they wouldn't be doing, either a wealth tax or a payroll tax.
Yeah.
But I think the dynamic, from what I'm seeing in Olympia right now, you look at the budget proposals that just came out. What I'm hearing is that the votes are there to. I think the payroll tax is likely to go away. That's what I'm hearing. But I think the wealth tax is very much in play right now.
And that's why I say one of the two will pass. Is they do no longer have in the Democratic caucus in both the House and the Senate a couple of members who go, you know what, I'm not going to walk that plank and face my voters. So until the voters of Washington State punish a Democrat legislator for voting for massive tax increases, which they voted for tax increases in every budget since 2013. They've raised taxes and fees every budget since 2013. Until one of them loses because of their tax vote, they'll keep doing it.
Well, wait, in other words, you're saying that the voters want the tax increase.
No, I'm saying that the
wait a minute.
I'm saying
the voters are not punishing them for doing something. That means the voters are approving the tax increase.
Well, and see, that's what the progressive left wants you to think of for last
What did
November.
I miss?
No, well, last November, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the initiatives that were on the ballot, and the message the voters sent is, we don't want these cuts. We don't want this. The campaigns had nothing to do with the substance of that. And that's because if you're running a campaign, you're running to win. So you're not going to say, hey, we want a capital gains tax. You're going to talk about, look at all the puppies that will get hurt if we don't. And when you outspend
Are these
your
political
opponent,
strategists criticizing the job of political strategists?
No, I'm saying
Yeah,
they did the right
that's what he's
thing.
doing.
I said he did the right thing, but the message that the left got is, the voters love our capital gains tax. They want more of higher taxes, and that's not the message that the initiative sent.
Well, it's not exactly what the Republicans said either. And it's actually taking a look at it. I didn't hear a lot of screaming and yelling when it was over. It was like, hey, you know what? We don't have to worry about cutting the budget anymore. Well, we're okay now. We're okay for another year, maybe two.
So I will say, I did the Defend Washington campaign, right? I was one of the consultants who worked on the campaign to oppose the Brian Haywood initiatives and to repeal the capital gains tax. We certainly ran on the cuts. We did. Randy's right about that. But we also, I will say, there was strong public support for taxing the wealthy. And we saw that, not just in Western Washington and the blue parts of the state, but all across Eastern Washington. I have been saying for a few years now that kind of counterintuitively, but with the rise of MAGA, right, with the rise of right-wing populism that says that these elites are ripping us off and taking our stuff away, there has been more openness on the right to kind of draining the swamp or seeing these rich people over there, making out like bandits.
But only if they're California hedge fund. I mean, come on. The whole campaign was California hedge fund evildoers.
Well, okay,
I mean,
without
you didn't
going
have
too far in one campaign, I just want to keep this the bigger picture here. So let me ask you, Randy. What is it that there are Republican legislators, believe it or not, in Washington State, and some of them drafted a budget without these higher taxes. So what are they cutting, or what spending increases are they reducing that the Democrats are refusing to?
The first place they go to are the public employee union contracts, which is, Jay Inslee on his way out the door cut one last sweetheart deal with the public employee unions that had given tens of millions of dollars to Jay Inslee to get elected. So
when he's leaving, he no longer has
he's on his way out.
Interest, right?
He's on his way out the door. Oh, Jay's always got conflict of interest, but he's on his way out the door, cuts the deal. That is the biggest driver of spending. Not all of it, but the biggest increase is those contracts. And the Republicans
So is it
recognize
overturning those increases, or are you talking about just furloughing, or is it a pay cut?
No, it's not a pay cut. Republicans said, we'll give you a $5,000 one-time payment.
Okay.
What they don't do is raise your salary so that you build in the bow wave, is the Olympia terminology, of future budgets will have to take on costs that you don't take on today. And that's what the Democrats have done for the last 15 years at a time when we were getting record revenues. And that is just bad management.
Well, I'm not so sure it's bad management as it is making sure that you don't end up causing yourself more grief and aggravation. I mean, the fact is yes, there's a point here where the salaries that we see, when I was talking about all those people who have lost jobs because of the federal cuts, who'd have thought that a teacher at the University of Washington would have her budget cut because she was actually getting money from research funds that have nothing to do with poli-sci. And so from that perspective, what we have seen is now the people's salaries that are part of those contracts are absolutely the first thing that should be cut, and it should be
despite inflation, the fact that there's been inflation?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And not only that, but the fact that more people are losing jobs, and some of the costs have already gone up. Even just, healthcare costs are going up. In all of that, what is happening next is we are going to have to see the public stand up and say, cut it, cut it, cut it.
Okay.
I will say this, whereas Randy and I disagree about whether the voters of a blue state like Washington are really against taxing the rich. I don't think they're against. I think they like the idea of taxing the wealthy to fund government services. I think we saw that in the elections last year. I will say this, though. I do think the Democrats, the progressive kind of large, almost supermajorities in Olympia, are playing with fire a little bit with the scale of the tax increases that they're talking about, and not just the scale, but in particular the wealth tax is particularly fraught and controversial for Democrats. It splits part of the coalition. It has caused enormous uproar behind the scenes from the business community, who are often allies, and some of the very, very wealthy donors who, in fact, were writing the $1 million checks for the campaigns that I was involved with to preserve things like the capital gains tax.
The voters are ahead of those donors because they've gotten more populist, not just Democrats, but there's more of a wealth tax coalition. Isn't that what I heard?
Well, what I'm saying is that the voters are predisposed to liking taxing the rich, but are they going to be there when there's a $30 million campaign that comes after the Democrats pass it? And by the way, the people on our side aren't stepping up to give us the money to fight that. One of the reasons we won the fight against Haywood last time was we had a lot more resources than he did. On our side,
it was a 20-1 fight, which is always a good fight. You win early.
Poor little billionaire.
But the bigger question is all of the other taxes and fees that have been ladled on in the last few years have been adding up on folks. You look at the carbon tax that people are paying, and whether it's 20 cents or 40 cents, it's a little bit more than the pennies that Jay Inslee talked about when he was governor. And folks are mad about that. They're mad about, the increases that they've seen in all kinds of fees. Just this week.
How do you know they're mad about that? Did they kick out the Democrats in November?
No, they did not. But
Actually,
the races were not about that. What I'm saying is, when you start talking about those facts, as Sandeep just said, when the fight is between people with equal resources, the voters of Washington State, they may want to tax the rich, but they also want to be the rich. And what they're worried about is, I'm going to get to the point where they're going to tax what I'm calling rich. And now they're jacking the prices on fishing licenses and hunting licenses.
Don't forget the gas tax. The gas tax is huge.
Very quickly, putting the politics of it aside, just on a policy level, this wealth tax, I do think there is a significant difference between the kind of wealth tax that's being proposed now and the capital gains tax, right? This wealth tax, it's controversial in part because, as the Department of Revenue tried to tell, the governor and the legislature, implementation-wise, it's not at all clear that they can pull this off.
You mean legally or logistically?
I think there are real legal questions, but there's also huge opportunities for evasion, and actually being able to get compliance with the wealth tax is a big question mark. April Berg, on the House side, who wrote the budget, is assuming almost a 50% or 50% plus evasion rate in the tax. And when you're talking about the wealthiest people, she's talking about only 10% compliance with it. So I do wonder why Democrats on my side are talking about it a tax and making big promises about a tax, we may not be able to, may not deliver the promise. And
You mean like the city of Seattle, which is now facing a even bigger budget deficit because tax revenues are down on a tax they can't collect.
Right. We're about to have a huge political fight about a tax that may not work. Right. And I wonder about that.
That's one, but I also can tell you that what's happening, look at the numbers he's talking about, 40 and 50% of not going to actually comply. Well, the IRS just put a note saying that they expect 42% of us not to pay our taxes this year. What's happening is people will find places where they can actually take the tucks in their own budget. But if you lose too many jobs in a household, and if you see more expenses going up, and that kid still got 2 more years to get through college, I got to say that there is a time when we're all going to have to face the reality.
Okay, we could talk all day about this. I got one more question before we leave. Just this budget question is, as the federal government cuts back and devolves, there might be Medicaid cuts, with public health funding cuts, and and Washington is a trade-dependent state. There's concern that tariffs and whatever else is going on could hurt the economy, which hurts tax receipts, all that stuff. If less money is coming in, let's just say from the federal government, does that change the debate over increasing the capital gains or having a jumpstart type tax or a wealth tax? Because Washington, I know, Randy, you're going to say there's still plenty of fat to cut.
Well, first I was going to agree with Sandeep. The bigger problem is the recession.
Yeah.
If indeed the trade wars and the erratic foreign policy of the current administration dip us into a recession, which is, 50-50 or more. I mean, then you really are talking about revenues going away.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the state legislature, if they came together, they could write a no new taxes budget. Nobody would like it. There would be cuts in programs that they wanted to see more spending in, but they could do it. If a recession hits, the money goes away. It's not like you're getting more money to spend. I mean, the legislature has been spending more money than it has received in revenue for the last 2 biennium.
So are you saying that plus Sandeep's populism that you pointed out, is there going to be more will, even given less money and even a recession, will there be more will for these taxes rather than just spending reduction?
If you could get somebody else to pay for your bills, you know what? You can do this.
Okay.
You can do this.
I got to pause it there because before we take a break, I want to ask about one more voting question. So in a state with a Democratic House and Senate and governor, Republicans don't get a lot, but they do have the state initiative. And as we were saying with Brian Haywood, et cetera, they can go straight to voters who are not necessarily as Democrat friendly as as Olympia. So last fall, Republicans and conservatives went to voters with a measure to slow the state's shift from natural gas toward technology like electric heat pumps. And voters said yes. But a King County Superior Court judge just invalidated that measure. Judge Sandra Widlin ruled that Initiative 2066 violates the state constitution, which says an initiative has to be about only one thing, and it has to spell out exactly what part of state law it would change. Randy, you are mad at the King County judge, but the initiative sponsors say they're going to appeal up to the state Supreme Court if they have to. So do you think that court is going to see that constitutional question any differently?
No, because as you said, the Democrats control everything, and the state Supreme Court is one of those things. Every member of the state Supreme Court is a Democrat. So the chances of a Republican...
So you're accusing the justices of being... it's not really about the Constitution. This is a serious charge. It's not about the Constitution. It's just partisanship on the part of the state Supreme Court and Judge Sandra Widlin?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this
what
has
evidence
nothing to do
do you
with
have for that?
Well,
she spelled out. Yeah. Sandeep, you can pick this. I'm doing a lot of talking, but didn't the judge spell out why constitutionally this initiative does not pass muster?
Yeah, she did, and I think she makes a strong case. Look, I hear a lot of mewling from the Republicans about activist judges.
Mewling?
Yes.
Mewling.
I caught that too.
Yeah,
I'm a husky, so anything about cats is not going to work here.
Randy's carping, he's not mewling.
Right? There you go, carping.
Yeah. But
barking is fun.
But the reality is, this was always a weird initiative, the way they wrote it. I mean, when we looked at it from day one, because it tried to do two different things at once, right? There was the first thing was Governor Inslee had had the building construction council. Well, he didn't have them, but he appointed people to it, environmentalists who then
he had them. You had it right the first time.
Who then passed a rule that new hookups for new home construction would not have natural gas in them, right? So it repeals that. But then it also repeals a completely separate bill that was a technical bill about how Puget Sound Energy could manage the transition from natural gas to electricity,
incentivizing electricity,
right? Which involved, how do you manage your different ratepayer bases? Mm-hmm. It's technical and complicated about policy. How do you spread the costs of the transition? Mm-hmm. And that's a whole different ballgame from this building code thing. And to mash it all up together is what the judge is pointing out is a two-subject violation.
Which, of course, they've only been talking about for 8 years at least. We've all said, every time you want to say that this bill is not going to go anywhere because it has too much stuff going on. The fact is that we've been doing this for like years and years, and we still fall into the same gaps. What I think here is that this is really stupid, and the fact is the actual natural gas bill was never really popular.
But why did it even get to the ballot? Why couldn't it had been ruled on before it was on the ballot? Our system doesn't work that way.
It does not work that way.
No.
Judges do not put themselves in the will of the voters until after the voters have told them their will.
Okay.
Then they do it. And I will disagree with Sandeep on one thing about the PSE bill being technical. It's technical only in the sense that PSE gets a lot more money and charges everybody because Jay Inslee doesn't like natural gas. Okay, and
I've heard that the climate doesn't like natural gas.
Well, you know what? The climate can adjust to a lot of things, but Jay Inslee cannot. And, but this was not a technical bill. It was a payoff to Puget Sound Energy and their support for Inslee.
Yep. And that's what most women very much disapproved of, which is when we were doing polling on this, let me just tell you that this is what people said. They were just, particularly women and older folks were saying, you're not going to tell me what kind of energy I'm going to have.
Are you going to say this has to do with women and cooking on gas stoves? What is the female connection? Is that what you're saying?
Talk to the restaurant industry about that, Bill, because that's exactly what
that's happening. That's what happened. And people, I got a new stove. And I said to myself, I'm so proud of myself because now I don't have to worry about natural gas. And the fact is, wouldn't you know it? They turned around and got me one anyways. And what happened is that, I hate to think, but the fact is that it was more than just being told what you can and cannot have. You have crossed the boundaries here into what should be a decision of my household, not the law.
Well, we can talk about externalities and what's a private decision and what affects the air we all breathe, but we don't have enough time. I will say I voluntarily got an induction oven that I love, but the involuntary part would hurt. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Can we agree on that?
And remember, this wasn't about taking your gas stove, ripping it out of your kitchen. Right. This is about new construction going forward.
Construction.
Right.
Yes,
so, and anyway, look, I mean,
okay, we got to pause because we got so much more. We had a whole week to talk about. Let's take a break and come right back with more Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from Jazz Night School, an adult music education community dedicated to honoring Black American music with combos, big bands, vocals, and classes, helping beginners build skills and challenging advanced musicians to grow. Registration and more at jazznightschool.org.
51 degrees in Seattle's University District at 1227. Showers in the forecast overnight, low 43, more showers tomorrow, high 55.
Hey there, KUOW listeners. It's Luke Burbank. Did you know Livewire is coming back to Seattle April 11th? We'll be at Benaroya Hall with Rick Steves, food expert Jay Kenji, Lopez Alt, and music from Pedro the Lion. Tickets are available at livewireradio.org.
KUOW live events sponsored by Finney Ridge Painting and BECU.
KUOW's Week in Review. Did I mention we're on YouTube? We're live streaming, so you can see how smart we are as well as hear it. We've got public affairs consultant and political consultant Sandeep Kaushik, along with political consultants Randy Pepple and Cathy Allen. And let's talk Sound Transit getting a new CEO, and it is King County executive and Sound Transit board member Dow Constantine. How do you feel about his stewardship? He's been a board member for a long time at Sound Transit. He was the chair of the board for one term, a couple of years. What did you think of the job he did, Cathy? Is he deserving of this job?
I don't know that he's deserving of the job so much as he's the only one qualified to do it. I looked at this and said to myself, oh my gosh, this $450,000 isn't going to look good. But he could have asked for $650 and gotten it. And the other part about me was that, I'm looking at the absolute pathetic, absolutely unqualified people who are now running our federal government. At least, I said with Dow Constantine, I believe this guy can do this job, as opposed to the 18 key appointments of this Trump administration that have no business doing, the Homeland Security and doing the Defense Department. So I'm looking at this as, thank God we got the guy.
Well, I bet somebody looks at cost overruns, at delays. We still don't have the east side and the west side connected. The West Seattle link alone, they're talking about $7 billion. So and there was very little public process. We didn't even know who the finalists were. So did anybody I've heard a lot of criticism. I wonder if you agree whether Dow Constantine should not have gotten this job.
I absolutely think that this was a bad decision by Sound Transit's board. For the majority of the board that was appointed by Dow Constantine to their position to turn around and vote for him for a massive pay increase, and it's not $450,000, Cathy. If you look at it, if he serves one day and doesn't get rehired for a second year, it's a 2-year contract. He gets $1 million plus for going to Sound Transit. I mean, it's just
what does the private sector pay to running a
the private sector
that
does not promote a guy who, as board chairman, presided over massive cost overruns, massive delays in delivery, and by the way, has an organization that is paying now 3 CEOs not to be CEO. It is a massive failure.
I do think how you perceive the performance of the agency is coloring how people look at this pick. Like if you're one of the people,
why wouldn't it?
Well, right. But if you're somebody like Randy who sees Sound Transit as being, bloated and spending too much money and, in need of a shakeup or some kind of significant change, then, well, look, this is very much a status quo kind of steer the course sort of pick, right? Dow is very much a Sound Transit insider who's coming in to continue running it. But I do think even on kind of the Seattle, sort of progressive left, there's been some frustration with Sound Transit, not about the costs as much as the slow pace of why does it take so long for us to build the system out. I did the Sound Transit 3 campaign in 2016, and that campaign is funding us getting to Ballard, and they're telling us we're not going to get to Ballard till 2042.
2039
2042 is
well, that's because you're behind a guy with his left-hand turn signal on, and we're not going to get around him until then.
So there's so much business as usual process and
overruns,
hand-holding and delay and stuff like that. And I am frustrated by that and would like to see some shakeup where we, Ezra Klein nationally is talking about this new abundance stuff. That book is getting a lot of attention. And part of that book is why in blue cities and blue states do we have such a hard time doing stuff and building stuff and maybe
building more housing?
Yeah, and maybe we need some shakeups in how we do government processes on this kind of stuff. And so I do think there's some frustration around that related to Sound Transit and the pace of construction.
Well, I would only say one thing. You guys, You have never had a good thing to say about Dow Constantine. Randy especially, through the years. And one who hates him to begin with is going to hate him forever.
I have to
and I believe that.
I'm not anti-Dow.
I don't hate Dow, and I hosted a fundraiser for him at my business back in the 90s, Kathy. So that's incorrect. But
That's before my time.
This particular decision, I think, is just such an insider-driven decision. And it is rewarding an elected official who has not done a good job at Sound Transit. And
But couldn't it make the situation worse to hire somebody without the institutional knowledge?
Thank you.
So we're always, but the institutional knowledge of being over budget and not delivering things on time, that's knowledge that you don't need. And if you, for a $500,000 job, you're saying we can't find anybody smart enough to get up to speed fast enough. I mean, that's BS.
Yeah, look, if I want
that's government thinking.
If I want to make the case for Dow, I could talk about the fact that, while I'm frustrated by the slow pace of progress, there has been progress, right? Linwood opened up. We're opening up on the east side. We are seeing ridership on the system go up. Look, Dow knows the agency. He knows the region and its politics.
And the players.
He knows the key players, as to Kathy's point here, and the board members. So, if you feel like, we're on the right track here with Sound Transit, then Dow's an excellent pick. Right?
Okay, I want to bounce up before we leave this topic. I want to bounce something off you from I'm quoting a study. It's characterized as the nonpartisan Eno Center for Transportation. I cited a lot. I bopped around. I don't know about this study, but it's widely cited, and it compares lots of things. For one thing, light rail construction costs 3 to 4 times more in the U.S. than it does in Europe and Canada, and takes far longer. And Puget Sound Transit in this region was one of the areas they studied. And besides the real estate prices, construction inflation, and having to buy land and all that, they and political culture, they pointed out that Sound Transit spends 5 years negotiating and planning before they choose a route. The quote is, they have to secure permits in 84 jurisdictions. It's frequently caught up in being onerous and contentious. The region spends significant time addressing community concerns without a clear and consistent process for constraining requests. One interviewee said the region at large puts a high value on everyone leaving happy. And the underlying, though, a point that this study made that interested me is that Americans, including Puget Sounders, believe it or not, even in a blue area, don't love light rail. So when someone protests and slows down or blocks a project, voters don't say, no, you'll delay our light rail. They say, yeah, why should anyone have to put up with construction and big government? And unlike older cities, this area has landowners who remember the golden age of cars and driveways and parking spaces and suburban city living, and they want to keep that going. Do you think that's fair?
I do.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's actually a lot of support for transit. There's a lot of support for light rail. I think the frustration is not that they're building it. It's that they're not building it fast enough, as I said, right? And why isn't there more of it? And why didn't we have this crap 30 years ago, right? Why did we, in the forward thrust days, vote down that initiative that would have gotten us an 80% federal match, and we could have had a whole built-out transit system that only now we're catching up on. So I think there's a lot of desire and demand. There's a lot of ridership when the stations do open up. I don't think it's a question that people don't want transit or it's being forced on them or anything like that. I think
it has much more to do with the fact that we want transit because it's the right thing to do. We want electric cars. That's the right thing to do. So we want all these good things. And then Randy hands us the bill. And then what happens is when he says, look at this money. How are you going to waste all this money? And the fact for most people is when the bill comes due, that's when they're not as in love with Sound Transit.
No, most people want Sound Transit so that other people will take the bus so that the highways are open for them to drive their cars. Fixed route.
There you go.
Light
congestion.
rail.
We're getting rid of congestion. There you go, Randy.
Fixed route.
This is what I said. We're still a car culture.
Yeah, absolutely we are. Fixed route light rail is 19th century or 1900s, 19th century technology. I mean, it doesn't work in this region. I mean, it never did. I mean, we don't have the density. We've got hills. We've got water. We've got a lot of problems for making light rail work. And we're 150 years behind some other cities that got theirs built,
And we have-
even
and
though they have
people
water as
people
well.
love it, and they
Yeah.
ditch their cars because they have good
It's
transit.
it's all their government has spent money on since that time. Out here, our government has spent money on car infrastructure, and now they're
Yes.
letting that go to hell.
So you wonder why we love roads, because we paved over so much that it's very road friendly. You're right about that.
Well, I don't know. I just finished a 4,000-mile road trip, and there are plenty of places that aren't paved over, but there is enough pavement for you to make the road trip.
Okay, next, since we're talking transit, on Monday, King County Metro will resume asking bus riders on the busiest routes whether they've paid their fare. If you can't prove you paid, you get a verbal reminder, then 2 written warnings, then it's a $40 fine with some options to lower that. Sandeep, why should a bus ride not be as free as a walk on a sidewalk?
Well, because they need to actually make some money to pay for the system, you know.
Well, sidewalks cost money.
I mean,
public parks are free.
You could have conceived of a way of doing this where maybe you could have done. I mean, in theory, right? You could have gone. Make the whole system free. That would be preferable to the system we have now, right? The system we've had for the last 5 years, where ostensibly we charge a fare and we expect to have revenues come in and use that money to support the system, but we don't enforce it anymore. So therefore, more than a third of the riders don't pay anything. Therefore, turns out when you don't enforce and when people are fare evading and ride for free, you end up having sometimes public safety problems, the quality of the transit ridership experience.
Because of evasion or because poor people get on the bus?
Well, not just poor people, but you have people, smoking fentanyl in the back of the bus or,
It becomes a rolling toilet if you're not collecting at the
right.
door.
I mean, I've called the Metro bus system at times and it's turned into a rolling fentanyl den, and guess what?
What's
lot of
happened
people.
to you? What has happened to you on a bus that someone have you ever seen someone smoking fentanyl on a bus? Because I haven't, but I'm sure some people have.
I personally have not, but
Okay.
I have talked to several people who have said who have come off the bus and said to me,
And they're high?
No, and they're saying it's not that
They saw something they didn't like?
Well, I will just tell you there are call it bougie, call it whatever you want, but there are a lot of people in Seattle that are like, if you degrade the quality of the transit experience, they'll do what Randy wants them to do, which is hop in their cars again, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want to sit next to somebody smoking fentanyl while I'm going to work, right?
Do you know anyone who's ever sat next to someone smoking fentanyl and didn't have a choice? They had to sit there and take it.
Well, they were on the bus.
Well, the drivers' union would tell you, Bill, the answer to that question is yes.
Right.
Because they're driving the bus,
Yeah.
and there's fentanyl use in the study that came out last year, and I don't want to quote it because I won't get the number exactly right, but a significant percentage of fentanyl residue was found in public transit vehicles. And the drivers' union said, this is something that we have been complaining about. And public health officials said, but that was non-lethal fentanyl. That's not going to hurt anybody. I mean, they just glossed right over it, but it's real. And when somebody
Drivers
reads
are
that,
falling over.
No, drivers are complaining about it,
Yeah.
so I'll believe them because I don't get on the buses myself.
Okay, it's Kathy. I haven't heard from you. Do you have anything to add, or should I move on?
No, I was going to say, well, look at you guys. You go into grocery stores every day, and no one is going to stop you from shoplifting. This is not an aberrant thing that's happening to mass transit. This is a lot more that has to do with the ethics of our times.
You want more cops on the buses?
Actually, no, what I want is I want to be able to be safe, and I want to be able to have some reinforcement with help from someone else.
Yeah. Okay. Along with that, Sandeep, you brought this up. You sort of put these in a constellation of moves. The Seattle Public, and you'll connect these two for me. Seattle Public Schools has decided to keep its accelerated learner, the highly capable cohort schools program for now. The district had said it's phasing out that model to increase access and make it more equitable. Last year, about 3% of Seattle students identified as highly capable were black, about 8% Hispanic, 16% Asian, 53% white, 20% multiracial. Now the district says it will try to make the program more diverse and try to make every neighborhood school program equally effective and resourced. We don't know whether that will happen. And how do you connect these two moves?
Look, we went through a period starting around circa 2020, which whatever you want to call it, I call it the period of peak woke or whatever in Seattle, where I think we took a turn towards a whole series of quite radical changes in how we ran our government and our institutions, including things like getting rid of fair enforcement in the name of equity. All of this was sort
That's
of done,
radical.
Done it. It was.
There are free transit systems.
Well, you know.
Okay, it's radical. Go ahead. I want to stop your talking points. Go ahead. It's radical.
Along with things like, hey, we're going to get rid of gifted and talented programs in our schools, and guess what?
What they said was they were going to keep people in the same schools and have teachers teach them differently according to their pace.
Right.
And they were accused of not pulling that off, which maybe they didn't.
Well, they didn't, and it's not clear they can pull it off. Can the teacher sit there with 35 kids and have the gifted kids over here? What they end up doing is they hand the kid the gifted kids an iPad and tell them to go in the corner and learn on their own, right? And that's not a successful gifted and talented program. Yeah, right. So, but I think what I'm saying is that this turn towards what I would call a kind of radical chic or identitarian sort of equity based stuff. What was
access
was based
fairness
was based on look, equity is a valuable concept, and it provides us a yardstick by which we can measure how we were doing in terms of social justice, right? In terms of our policies and stuff. But it is one yardstick among many that we use. And if you misconceive of equity, it very easily turns into a race to the bottom of taking away choices, of taking away options. That's what happened in the Seattle public schools. That's why they were pushing to close some of what I would say some of the ideologues on the city council were pushing to close the option schools because too many white kids are enrolled in these alternative schools, therefore we're going to get rid of all of it. There are too many white kids in the gifted and talented programs.
Well, as I said, their promise was not to get rid of all of it, but we just talked. You said that it was is or will be unsuccessful what they want to do.
But rather than doing there's a value in considering equity, but rather than doing the hard work of identifying the poor kids, the minority kids, the black and brown kids that ought to be
are gifted.
Ought to be in the HCC program, but maybe there are cultural or social barriers or economic barriers that are keeping them out. Let's identify them and bring them in the program. That's work. Yeah. It's much easier to just tear it all down, right?
I want to add here that what is happening is that as you do this equity based upon how you look, different tests, gender, as you take a look at all of that, what we've done is we've gone for simple diversification. What we haven't done is gone into any intellectual / diversity of opinion. The thing that is missing in all of this is that it's not necessarily the core of what the content is going to actually help us do and not do. I think we take cheap shots at being able to try to take that equity leveling based upon tests done by usually the white upper class. And what you do is you end up copying what is easy to see and not easy to change.
Look, I mean, just from a sheer did this work? Did it deliver results? Did this push to get rid of? What we've seen is a massive exodus of families out of the Seattle school district. The loss of those kids has been playing into
what number qualifies as a massive exodus?
It's thousands. I mean, they've lost. Yeah. I mean, I think that they've lost enrollment
it was 20%.
Well, I don't know. There's 20, but it was like 5. I mean,
it was 5 to 20% depending on the school.
I think it was they've lost enrollment about 5,000 kids. And look, Danny Westmead of the Seattle Times just wrote a column about this. When they surveyed people, when they finally, very reluctantly, they avoided doing it for a long time.
Yes, that's true.
When they surveyed the parents about why, what's your take on what's going on in Seattle schools, what they heard was, you're getting rid of our choices. You're getting rid of the things we want, like the gifted and talent program, and we're going to go somewhere else.
Thank you for bringing that up. So this columnist at the Seattle Times quoted the study as saying families, quote, who disenrolled their students from Seattle public schools overwhelmingly cited concerns about the quality of education and the curriculum as top reasons. Okay, quality of education and the curriculum. are very vague. They don't mention highly capable cohort. They did, I read this study that Danny linked to, they did break the reasons families considered who left, considered enrolling into 6 categories of reasons that they left. One of them was specifically changes to highly capable services. 20% of the respondents said they were motivated a great deal by that.
Yep.
25% said they were motivated somewhat. 53% say they were, of people who left, families who took their kids out, 53%, the majority said they were not motivated by changes to highly capable services. Now, whether that's still, I'm not saying that a minority it doesn't mean anything, but I think Daniel Westmead was cherry picking.
No. But here's what you're misunderstanding about that stat,
Okay,
right?
help me out.
We're talking about a program here that applies to maybe like it's only about 5% of the kids
fair.
overall are in that program
That's
to
fair.
begin with. So when half the people leaving are saying they're leaving because you got rid of that program, that's a hugely disproportionate number.
The other half are leaving for the 95% other reasons.
Of other reasons. I'm not saying that it's a great, that they love it, that they left because they love it. There could be lots of, but I'm just saying quality of education and curriculum as top reasons, quote, unquote, that's vague.
The quote-unquote equity-based war on HEC was just one of a series of moves done in the name of equity by the Seattle School District. When you add them all up together, it adds up to a big problem and bad results.
But even more than that, I mean, it's just another example that the Seattle Public School District is in debt again. The Seattle Public School District is seeking a new leader again. The Seattle Public School District is announcing bold new plans that it reverses shortly thereafter again. The people watching that go, is this ever going to get better? Because these are the same complaints about the Seattle Public School District been going on for the last 40 years. I mean,
you mean that they listen to their constituents and change their mind?
Yeah.
No, that they can't budget worth a damn and are always in debt, and so they're pinging back and forth off the rails of good times and bad times, and so they cannot have a cohesive strategy that will retain a leader there. For any period of time.
We got to take a break. Kathy, did you have something to add, or did we cover
I did. And that is, something, when we get to the point where everything is wrong with the leaders we have, usually in other cultures, you just get rid of them or kill them. In this case, what it looks like is that we're all building a actual future that none of us want to live in. And that's actually what scares me the most.
Give me a specific example, please.
Of the fact that we're yelling at the school board. We're yelling at Dow because he's now running Sound Transit. And oh, by the way, where you're at, we have all kinds of overruns. Have you ever known of a transportation project that hasn't been?
We're not
at
alone.
least double. I think this is not. Yeah. What is that
That's true.
This is a culture we are growing that is actually defeating all of our possible kinds of happy lives. And I will not live with a Republican-centric kind of life that says everybody should be fired, that says everybody is incompetent, that says everybody is getting paid too much. The real truth is we got to start listening to the people that are leading, and if we don't like it, get our butts in gear to be able to get there and actually help out.
Yeah, if you hate government, of course you're gonna be biased against what government is doing.
Sure.
Right? Fair?
That would be fair, but once again, the use of the word hate with to ascribe my political feelings is one that I will reject.
I take it back. I take it back.
But
That's
what I
too
would
strong.
say is you're absolutely right. Those who hate government, and we're seeing massive examples of that at the federal level right now.
Yeah.
People who largely don't understand government. To hate it at that level and think that taking a meat axe to everything is a worthwhile approach. And that's not what I'm advocating. But what I would suggest is this, that Seattle Public Schools is once again in a mess of its own making. And they are in that mess because they do not have strong leadership at the superintendent level. They have gone through, since John Sanford, rest in peace, passed, they seemingly have been unable to put somebody in that position that could last more than a few years of guiding the district. And it's a hard district to lead. I mean, but hey, the Highline School District has, 43 official languages within their district. So, a lot of school districts are hard to lead.
Yeah.
But Seattle has seemingly been unable to solve very basic problems for a long time.
Okay, we're over time because I wanted to listen to everybody, but now we have to take a break so we can come back, find out what made you smile. Kathy, that's an improvement, right?
That's true.
What are we going to smile about when we come back on Week in Review?
1253 KUOW. Nice to have you with us on this Friday during the noon hour, Week in Review. Stay tuned. More of the program is just ahead. KUOW is powered by listeners just like you. A huge thank you to our new and returning monthly donors for participating in KUOW's spring fundraising drive. If you missed your chance to give, there's still time. You can become a monthly member today at KUOW.org. And thanks.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
It's KUOW's Week in Review. You can see us on YouTube. You can listen, as you're doing now, to Sandeep Kaushik and Cathy Allen and Randy Pepple. I'm Bill Radke. A couple things before I ask you about what made you smile. You mentioned Seattle's budget, which we haven't said much about, but the payroll expense tax brought in almost $50 million less than projected last year. The mayor said the drop is, quote, aligned with recent reports of major employers moving thousands of high-paying jobs out of Seattle to other cities in our region. Seattle Parks and Recreation facing cutbacks, so they might close the Discovery Park Visitor Center. We don't have time to go in and debate it, but if you have a one-sentence reaction, bring it.
Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that it would cost more for a public toilet down on the waterfront, which we also read about this week.
Yeah.
But we have to close things at Discovery Park. Is there a prioritization anywhere?
You don't want more public restrooms downtown?
Why don't you take care of what you have first and then start adding things that you don't have now?
If there's no bathroom, I cannot take care of what I have.
Puget Sound is a very large body of water, Bill.
Wow. There is a little beach there.
Well, we should be building more public bathrooms, but the problem with the $2 million bathroom down there for the 6 stalls is, why the heck did it cost $2 million? Like that seems like you could build like a pretty nice mansion for $2 million, right? And again, this goes to the endless process and delay and hand-holding and, regulatory interventions and all that stuff that keep jacking the costs of these things higher and higher. And we could end up building these things a lot faster and a lot cheaper and do a lot more of it if we were a little smarter about how we governed ourselves and regulated ourselves.
Well, I think what we need are far more women, because you guys are dreary, old, and sullen people. I want to say...
We're not selling people, we're selling men. Even worse.
I want to say that there were more women last night at the ball game than there were men. And as a result, what happened is we won. So maybe with a few more women around, we could have a little happier life.
I love the women in my life, and thank you for coming, Kathy. Is that what made you smile? We're at the end of the show. Was it the Mariner victory?
Absolutely.
What made you smile?
I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking, oh no, they're going to blow it. Oh no, they're going to blow it. Oh no. And they won.
How about that?
So it's the beginning of a winning streak.
Anybody else?
Well, Mariner related. I mean, the hot dogs from heaven and floating hot dogs is always a good idea. And when they triple the amount that they're throwing, that's good. But I'll also say, seeing the tulips coming up my yard reminds me that the Tulip Festival will be beginning up in Skagit County. Another reason to go north and see the flowers.
Indeed, take the light rail up there.
The thing that made me
go there. I'm just kidding. You Sunday.
Yeah, the thing that made me smile was I heard this week that the city is working on moving forward with an effort to honor and memorialize the late Charlie Royer, former mayor of Seattle, last 3-term mayor. He was my friend and in some ways taught me almost everything I know about Seattle and its politics. I'd learned at Charlie's knee. And And it made me especially smile because, not to get ahead of their announcement, and it's not a done deal yet of what they're working on, but it's going to be down probably in the vicinity of the stadiums. And Charlie's last great civic passion was to build a neighborhood and housing in the vicinity of the stadiums. He was the head of the public facilities district board that oversaw the ballpark. And so City Council just last week passed Council President Nelson's legislation to do that. Charlie wasn't around to see it. That makes me sad, but it makes me smile to think I know he was up there somewhere looking down on this.
Plaque, statue next to Ken Griffey? What are we talking about?
I don't want to, I'll let them figure it out. Yeah.
Okay, then I will just add on our way out that remember the Mariners replaced the song Louie Louie in the seventh inning stretch with the Macklemore song, Can't Hold Us, and some fans didn't like that. So we came up, actually our producer, Kevin Kniestek, came up with a Louie Louie Macklemore compromise.
Return to the Mac. Get up what it is, what it does, what it is, what it isn't. Looking for a better way to get up out of bed instead of getting on the internet and checking a new hit.
Great mashup, right? Okay, so last season, though, Macklemore made some controversial comments at that Palestine Will Live Forever benefit concert, and the Mariners pulled the song Can't Hold Us. So last night, I wasn't there, but they apparently brought back Louie Louie in the seventh inning stretch, but in a dance remix. This is it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Ha! Did you notice that, Kathy? Yeah. What did let's turn that down a little bit. I'll just stop it. Oh, thank you, Guy. What did the fans have to say? Could you tell whether they dug the remix?
I think they were thrilled. In fact, most of them are going like this. Is that what I think it is?
Louie Louie is back.
They were trying to identify it by the opening chords.
Yeah. Stop the madness.
Name that tune.
You don't like it?
I don't like it. Stop the madness. Either bring back Louie Louie, do Macklemore. I don't really care, but that's dumb.
Go back to the original Louie Louie. I mean, that was the connection to
what
the North
the hell
Side.
was that? Some kind of weird...
It's called a remix.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to go. That's we'll do a focus group. You political strategists do a Louie Louie focus group. Cathy Allen, political consultant. Randy Pepple, Republican political strategist. Sandeep Kaushik, political consultant. Seattle Nice podcast. Blue City Blues podcast. We're over time. All I have to say is Bill Radke, and see you next week.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books. Journalist Malcolm Harris discusses his new book, What's Left? 3 Paths Through the Planetary Crisis. Sunday, April 27th at 7 p.m. More information at thirdplacebooks.com.
World News from the BBC is coming up next on KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. Thanks for tuning in on this Friday afternoon. It's 51 degrees, a rainy day it is, with high today right around 53. Showers overnight, low 43. Tomorrow, Saturday, again,